we do have the explicit tag, so if you want to cuss, Andy, that's okay.
I'm going to tone it down this time because I think last time I cussed way too much.
Sometimes you have to earn the explicit tag just so people don't listen to their kids.
Oh, I'm the guy that you bring in for that.
Yeah. Well, every once in a while, I lead off a podcast with the story like, hey, guys, I was grocery shopping the other day, and there was this perky young couple in front of me at the checkout, and they were buying bran muffins and condoms. I thought to myself, well, there's a couple of healthy fuckers. Just sets the tone for the room, let you know where you're at. And hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the BAMF podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lafferty. We have a whole bunch of guys here today to talk about lots of stuff, mainly Sweet Christmas, Luke Cage on Netflix, as well as 70 Marvel's funkiness, Iron Fist, etc., the whole kit and caboodle. And after that, we're going to touch on superhero settings in general, mention the Ennies. Hey, you should go vote for the Ennies. Chris, you have anything for convention this year?
Third
Ed is up.
Yeah, and there are a few words in there that are mine, and I wish all of the good folks at Green Ronin luck.
Okay, well, there we go. And I think we should get started. Let me introduce everybody real fast. I keep calling you. Should I call you AP Klosky or something else on the air?
Andy's fine.
Andy. All right. Andy Klosky, who you might know as the guy behind the great Iron Age superhero RPG, Cold Steel Wardens. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing all right. Good to be back. It's been a tick.
It's been a while since we've had you on. I'm glad to be talking to you. Sitting next to him in our palatial Banff recording studios is Aldo. Say your last name. I'm sorry.
Regalado.
Yeah, I apologize. I've been living in the West for 10 years. I should be able to say Mexican name or Hispanic names without a problem. But and Aldo, why don't you introduce yourself real fast?
Yeah, no, I'm the co-author of Supers Revised. Been gaming since 1980 or so. And and I have the Superverse, which is the setting for Supers and several other systems, Icons, Bash, and Hero as well now that I'm trying to get out there.
And that's on Kickstarter right now. So
Kickstarter right now, yeah.
Sitting next to Aldo is Jacob Blackman. How you doing, Jacob?
Doing well. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, always a pleasure. Next to Jacob is Christopher McLaughlin. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how you doing?
All right. And last but certainly not least is Nick Garber from Apogee Studios. How you doing, Nick?
Doing great. How are y'all doing?
All right. So we're going to talk about Luke Cage. And Andy, I saw you writing about it on Facebook. You want to kick us off with your thoughts on that? And we'll
I suppose I should get clarification. Are we in spoiler territory here? Or are we trying to keep the details on the DL?
Spoil it away. If they haven't watched it and they're watching a podcast about Luke Cage, it's their own fault.
This is your official spoiler alert. You don't want to get So.
If you're gonna get out of town, get now.
Yep.
Sweet Vista.
No. Overall, I enjoyed it. I liked it more than season 1, which I kind of felt petered out after Cottonmouth died. The interaction between Luke, Bushmaster, and Black Mariah really sold me on this one. Especially, and I wasn't expecting to go into this season with so much emphasis on family. Luke's interaction with his dad, Mariah's coping with the idea of, is she a Dillard or is she a Stokes? Her reunion with her daughter, who I'm dead sure is going to be our season 3 villain. And then, of course, the whole Jamaican family with Bushmaster. So that was a big pleasant thing because it was able to extend through the whole season. Whereas, like I said, first season, I felt like as soon as Cottonmouth died, we really got derailed, and it was a tale of two half seasons there. But overall, I have no complaints, and I really feel episode 10 finally redeems Danny Rand in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right?
I mean, that's what I wanted from Iron Fist the entire show when he had his. And finally, we get it.
I really liked that too. I noticed they didn't do a whole lot of fight choreography with Danny Rand. It was more, him palling around with Luke Cage and busting heads here and there. They didn't really try to make a kung fu scene out of it, but I thought it worked. It was fun to watch.
The little bit that they did do in the Weed Grow House, I felt was a lot more solid. was definite improvement off of some of the stuff from the Iron Fist series, which, aside from one or two fights, was really abysmal.
There was no point watching it where I felt embarrassed for people who had made the show. Oh crap, guys! I got someone at the door. I got to go scare off a Jehovah's Witness. Can you guys continue without me? I'll be right back.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I definitely need an updated Marvel encyclopedia. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah.
For the cinematic universe or for just in general?
Just in general, because
Were there characters you didn't know?
I mean, I knew of Black Mariah, but I wanted to know more about her. It's like I heard of her, had no idea like her backstory or anything like that prior going into the show. And usually I go towards this bad boy here to help me out, and it has done failed me. So,
well, you know, I always had this image of a guy like trying to slap together a new like Marvel encyclopedia, and like he's just about to finish, and then he gets the memo about the new earth-shattering, universe-altering crisis, and then he realizes he's basically like the geeky Sisyphus.
And he's doing son of a
yes,
bitch.
yeah, and his life is just pretty much a living hell. But really, seriously, if you want a very, 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 very good historical background on like comics and other media, the much maligned Comic Book Resources. I know it gets a lot of crap since it became a listicle site and everything, but they were smart enough to keep their best writer, Brian Cronin, the guy who'd been doing Comic Book Legends Revealed and all that. And it seems like every time there's like a major development in like actual comics or movies or TV, he's doing like a really, 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 really good background of, well, this is how this was presented in the comics, and this is how it's changed. And in particular, when Cage season 2 started, he did a really good historical background piece on this is what these villains were like in the actual 70s comics, and here's why you should be really glad they mostly changed them for the TV series.
Well, yeah, I mean, because Bushmaster in the Marvel Encyclopedia has a snake tail.
Like,
well, I don't think anything quite prepares you for the original Black Mariah.
No, that's
it's like every panel has an unspoken, clearly written by white guys.
Damn that white privilege.
Here's where my Marvel foo is strong. The Bushmaster from the Luke Cage series is not the Bushmaster from Serpent Society. Those are two different characters.
Well, they only listed the one, so I'm kind of like out of sorts.
They still list him as John McIver, but they're totally different characters.
And that's fine. I mean, you gotta alter the character to make it, you know, most appealing on screen and to fit inside the world.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about that with world building and world settings later, I'm sure.
You know, they definitely obviously did that with Mariah's daughter as well. I mean, Nightshade, as is in the comic, I mean, you just couldn't bring that into your grim and gritty, you know, made for Netflix TV series with her. Like, my modus operandi, I'm going to make werewolves. No, that's not going to fly.
Not yet. Yeah, give it time. I mean, if eventually, I mean, hopefully they bring in Moon Knight and Ghost Rider.
Oh, I would.
There are rumors of a Moon Knight show on Netflix. They're unconfirmed.
Oh, really?
Oh, and Ghost Rider also.
I would revel in a Ghost Rider show. When they brought Robbie Reyes in on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, that was so awesome.
I was drooling, and then, you know, they flat out said, we can't handle the special effects budget. Well, you have an entire division for that. Go send Robbie over to there and start prepping for your Rise of the Midnight Suns crossover.
Yeah, but in season 6, it's all in space and it was all special effects of like spaceships and moons and destroyed planets and shit. I mean, come on. Let's pick an excuse and stick with it, guys.
Yeah.
What do you want to bet that like not being able to do something because the special effects would look too crappy is known as pulling in Inhumans around Marvel production studios?
I didn't even bother with that series. I knew it was going to fail from jump, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to waste my time.
People have told me the fact that I wouldn't watch a show with a giant teleporting bulldog in it is the greatest insult that's ever been paid any piece of media ever produced. And
yeah, but I would have read like 37 issues of it.
Well, I mean,
yes,
and I'm still half seriously telling people that the end of Avengers 4 is going to be Lockjaw teleporting, taking the gauntlet off Thanos' hand, eating it, burping, and teleporting out.
Deuces.
You know, I have seen comic book movies with worse endings. Looking at you, Daredevil. But you know.
Whoa.
So Aldo, have you given your thoughts on this one?
No, I haven't. I because I've been serving on that jury, I didn't get a chance to watch any of Luke Cage. I'm behind.
Oh, so you're going to get quite an education today.
Yes, I am. That's okay.
I thought the Tony Stark cameo was a bit much. What do you guys think?
It wasn't as cool as the Spider-Man just kind of swooping through. I mean, could you call it a cameo? It was just pretty much a shadow, but we knew who it was.
And well, I was going to make another joke just like the one you just made. So yeah, more of that. So yeah, I thought it was a good show. I got a problem with Netflix in that they pace this stuff so slowly. I almost feel like you could just make a supercut of the, every Netflix show down to like 3 hours.
And it does get a little repetitive too, as far as the villain of the week or villain of the, every other episode seemed to be kind of filler. I think you could cut these shows down to around, or at least the series down to about 6, maybe 7 episodes, and I would still be happy.
There is something that I am a little bit surprised that more shows don't do. But one of the things that really, really impressed me about the short-lived Powers series that they did on like the exclusive video game channel,
PlayStation Network.
Yes, thank you.
That was brilliant.
Oh God, I'm glad to meet somebody else that watched it and appreciated it.
Yeah, I mean, I had to download it because I don't own a PlayStation, but
that I think may have been one of their major failings. But one of the things that I really appreciated about it is that yes, there were episodes, but I think very few of them were the same running length. It's like they broke it down into this would be a good chance to stop and let people take a breath. I think one of the quote unquote episodes is only like 37 minutes or something like that. Yeah. And I'm surprised that hasn't really caught on. And I wonder if that isn't a smarter choice. I think the first season of Star Trek Discovery had some at least some slight variations with its running time. But there's a part of me that would kind of like to see that catch on at least a little bit. I certainly don't want to get down to the point where you're like, hey, here's another 5-minute quote unquote episode. But there are some shows that clearly suffer because this has to be 45 minutes whether we've got 45 minutes of story or not.
Well, and you don't necessarily need to do that. It's like I tell my writers when I'm doing comic books, okay, yeah, try and keep it around 22 pages per issue. However, treat it like a woman's skirt. Now, I'm probably going to get judged sexist for this, but this is something that was taught to me in art school and creative writing and things like that. So I had this professor who was ultra liberal, so don't attack me quite yet. He said, when you're writing something, especially with creative writing, it should be like a woman's skirt. It should be long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to be interesting.
Well, I guess technically it could be a man's skirt as well.
Hey, it's 2018.
They're into that.
Whatever blows your hair back, brother.
Yeah,
but that's the point. I mean, if you can tell the story in 38 minutes, tell the story in 38 minutes. If it takes you 52 minutes, tell it in 52 minutes. The thing is, the fans are going to watch it as long as it's engaging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I just I had this problem with all Netflix shows. It's not just the Marvel ones. Well,
they're all a standard 52 to 55 minute show run. At least with the Marvel Cinematic Universe on Netflix.
But even I was watching Orange is the New Black a couple of years back, and I read the book and I liked it. It kind of turned into a prison soap opera fast, but you could really tell there were some seasons where it was like, well, fuck, we don't know what to write now. We got 3 more seasons to fill, so let's start padding some stuff out. And
Sense8 was the same way with me. I got about halfway through the first season, and it just was not moving for me, so I dropped it.
I can tell you, Jacob, you've been kind of quiet. Did you watch Luke Cage?
I did. I enjoyed it very much.
Okay. Cool.
I understand the slow simmer of it because the first season was pretty interesting up to a point. I think they made a mistake of changing who the big villain was halfway through because they wiped out Cottonmouth, and then the rest of it is this guy you've never heard of, and he's suddenly his brother, and it's like that was unnecessary. Was this what's the point of this? Family angst? That was season 2's plot, is family angst.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more involved, yeah.
But in general, I did enjoy the second season. I liked a lot of the character development that happened. I liked the characters that they brought in, because Nightshade is one of my favorite Luke Cage villains, after Lion Fang. And if you know who Lion Fang is, you're a Luke Cage fan. But yeah, I thought what they did with Tilda is I think she's going to be an interesting character come third season.
I was pleasantly surprised at all the depth they gave to the villains. I mean, I joked about Orange Is the New Black being a prison soap opera, and well, it was. But yeah, I mean, you fleshed out characters like Bushmaster or Black Mariah, and I mean, fleshed them out deeply. They had romantic relationships where, they were complicated motives, and you had empathy for them even when they were terrible people. And so, I mean, it's a lot like, I guess, the way I think of modern Marvel villains, which I'm a little outdated on Marvel. Some of the, but more like a Magneto, where where he's coming from, you can understand why he wants to.
I mean, even Thanos. I mean, we discussed this weeks back when Infinity War came out. We talked about how our empathy for Thanos. I think it correlates well with what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doing with its villains. It's which makes them a lot more interesting, I believe. It's villains that it could be you on a bad day. And I just think that's really cool.
One thing that I was particularly interested in, and this is something that I'm pretty sure both Marvel and DC have really shied away from, and I'm glad to see this type of thing. I'm gonna get on my social justice soapbox here, is the fact that the relationship between Comanche and Shades was so important through the course of season 2, and it would be really easy to make that a prison butt sex punchline.
No, but
they really turned that into something really meaningful.
Special.
That was amazing.
And obviously, one cared more about maintaining his criminal empire than he did about a friend and lover. So.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, you saw that through. Well, I don't even know what episode that was where they were tied to the chair. I think it was like 8 or 9, somewhere around there. Some in the later issues, and yeah, it was definitely hinted on early on that they had this close bond. You were just kind of figuring out that it was just maybe they had each other's back and kept each other from getting shanked. And then you come to find out that they were in love. I mean, it was definitely kind of a shock, even though you kind of saw it coming. So yeah, it was cool to see.
Yeah, I was surprised they went there on a mainstream superhero thing, but yeah, it's it's nice to see the acknowledgement, and yeah, I mean that stuff happens every day. So
right.
Ultimately, it's been impressive how much of the cinematic Marvel universe has been about making the villains relatable and not evil to be evil. So far, I think the only villain we've seen who was evil to be evil was Red Skull.
Yeah.
But he was a
I have to disagree with you severely there, my friend.
Red Skull's ambitions were power, knowledge, and understanding, and it transcended human thought. So
I'm content that the Nazi is evil for that reason. But really, if it's been one of the great failings of the great disappointments, we'll say, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's just far too many of their villains are just evil.
Yeah, but Red Skull in the cinematic universe put the Nazis as a threat to what he wanted to accomplish.
Well, if we may, sir, can I put Red Skull aside for a second and make the point that I wish to make, and then
I'm sorry.
Have a separate conversation.
I didn't mean to interject.
If you want to have a separate conversation about Red Skull, that's certainly fruitful territory. But I was just simply going to make the point that if you look at the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Ronan's motivation is that he's evil. If you look at the first Doctor Strange movie, Dormammu is evil, and the people that work for him are evil. You know, if it's one reason I love the first Spider-Man movie, the first Marvel Spider-Man movie so much is because, you know, you had layers with the Vulture that you just didn't have in their preceding movies. And well, okay, all right, I hate to kick Marvel here, but you know, Thor: The Dark World. I mean, what a waste of Christopher Eccleston. Yeah. I mean, and they've had far too many villains that are just there to give them somebody to punch. Now, granted, they've never sunk to DC levels. Speaking of kicking people when they're down, but really, they've needed a villains upgrade, and I'm glad they're finally getting it with Ant-Man and Homecoming. No, I apologize. Yes, I'll shut up.
Black Panther. I mean, Killmonger was fantastic.
But ultimately, you have to agree. More villains have been relatable than others.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of issues with Killmonger, but we can discuss that in another show.
I think, I think we see an evolution. Is the fact that we start off with a lot of the more one-dimensional ones. You know, Jeff Bridges was amusing as Obadiah Stane, but it wasn't a particularly deep character. I mean,
no, he was a creed-driven character.
Exactly. He had one motivation. He wanted the company. That's about it. But by the time we start getting around to some of the later ones, like I would dare say even Ego and Yondu from Guardians 2, we see there's a lot more depth there.
Well, you had these villains that believed what they were doing was right. It was necessary for the expansion of life or expansion of knowledge or whatever. So, yeah, it definitely adds another layer to the villains.
And Bushmaster was pretty great in this, in that you really understood where he was coming from, why he wanted the revenge, but at the same time, he had people in his own family saying, "Don't do this. It's not necessary. All you're doing is causing more hate."
Well, what I liked about that whole dynamic with the opposition from people inside of his own camp was they were giving him the tale of, hey, if you seek revenge, dig 2 graves. You know, and he was definitely going that path. Now, what I found, what I was kind of hoping for was that it was going to be a Bushmaster Luke Cage kind of team up towards the end, to take Mariah down or to take down Nightshade or whoever they introduced as the villain for the latter half of the season. And that didn't happen, and that was fine. I wasn't disappointed by it, because as a fan, you throw up expectations and that stuff gets shot down all the time. But I really loved the Bushmaster character, and I found myself empathizing with him. It's like, you know what, if I was in that situation, I'd probably do the same thing. You know, if I had that power set, if I had that experience, that's probably the path I would take.
Yeah, I think we're deliberately meant to draw parallels between Cage and Bushmaster, but by the end of the series, you know, when you have Anansi flat out telling him, you know, exactly what you said, the if you seek revenge, dig 2 graves. I mean, he's gone full Captain Ahab at that point.
Right.
Mariah is his white whale, and he's going to take her down by hook or by crook. You know, she must burn, he says over and over again. And
yeah, the obsession consumes the morality of him.
Exactly. So any reasonable sort of, you know, justice that he might have been seeking, any sort of restitution for his family, I mean, at that point, it's just petty revenge.
Yeah, because I mean, he had met that point where he kind of had that retribution, you know, and then he was taking it a step further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we saw Mariah at her lowest. I mean, she had nothing. I mean, she lost the club. She loses all the money. You know, Bushmaster had won by episode 9, I think.
Right.
But he keeps pushing the issue. She must burn, and that's the point where he even loses his own family there. First metaphorically, and then literally, as she comes right back with a vengeance.
Right.
Was anyone else
Sorry.
really disturbed by that scene? The massacre at the Jamaican restaurant.
You're supposed to be.
Yeah, and I've seen some pretty messed up shit in my life. Being a combat soldier, even that was a little hard to watch. That even for me, and I was like, I cringed a little. So it was the writers did some research. They definitely put some impact in there.
And you could really tell it was Shades, because you know Shades was used to dealing with people who had it coming.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone you saw Shades beat up or kill had it coming.
Right.
at least in his mind, those people were innocents. They had no reason to be hurt. So that was a step that took
and
too
now
far.
He's in a part where he's dealing with pure vanity. Like, it's all for show.
Yeah.
It's all to I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. It's
he's appeasing his own ego.
Right. Well, and it's not his ego; it's Mariah's ego, and it's someone that he's in love with. So he's doing what he does to appease someone that he cares for. But even then, he's reached a new moral territory.
Yeah.
You know, he's, for someone as versed he is in the criminal empire, you know, he's reaching uncommon ground, unknown ground, and he's uncomfortable with it for the first time probably ever in his life.
Well, the resolution with the Shades storyline then by the end really kind of resonated with me, because you see him being pushed to that point of discomfort, to push to the point where, look, I can't do this, Mariah, I'm out, and she, you know, is turning her back on him, and then it's almost, it's stone cold for Misty to undercut him the way she does, even though her modus operandi, her entire drive is, I'm going to shut this whole thing down by the books. I'm going to make up what Raph did. You know,
right.
Rafe did.
Well, so, and that was an interesting dynamic too. I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, go ahead.
That was an interesting dynamic because they brought in the scarf from season 1, and how that affected Misty in season 2, and how she teetered that line. She even went as far as to try to plant evidence, and then she takes a dynamic 180 from where she kind of entered the season, which is like, okay, I'm going to be by the book. This case has to be by the book. It has to be ironclad. It has to be stone cold, you know, which definitely created some cognitive dissonance with her. And you could see that in the series. You know, it was actually causing her physical pain to wrap her mind around what she was doing and what she needed to do. So I think that was a really cool throwback to season 1 and how it affects the characters in season 2, which is important, especially, you know, fans of the series that are going to stick on for later on. You know, kind of show that.
Do you guys think this fits in anymore with the larger Marvel universe? Because it's such a disconnect in that we were joking about you don't see Spider-Man swinging around the streets and Tony Stark never shows up, you know, even like on a CNN, you know, screen in the background. But does it really kind of feel like this is the street level, you know, Andy, if you will, it's the Cold Steel Wardens version of Marvel? Or I'm sorry, I think you had a thought there.
This is really where New Corinth is sitting right next to Hell's Kitchen here.
Nick, you had a thought. I couldn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I was done.
Well, I did.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. To me, there are certain fictional things that there's an admission price, and if you're not willing to pay it, you shouldn't be allowed in. You know, Marvel's universe has been like this since John Kennedy was president. I mean, you could pick up every single issue of Daredevil, Spider-Man, Power Man, and say, you know, why don't these people just call Thor and have him solve it? So you kind of have to, you know, accept that there are some layers of separation there, even if they wouldn't make even if they don't necessarily make any larger logical sense. It's being true to the source material, and you either accept it or you go complain about not getting the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League.
Yeah, but there was a.
Hey, I'm in that camp, all right.
I will pray for your soul at Mass on Sunday.
Well, I have the Zack Snyder cut of Watchmen, and it's amazing. So.
Oh God, no! Oh God, no!
I sit there for 4 hours, completely entertained and loving every minute of it. I don't care what you say.
I fell on the floor laughing when that heartbreaking scene of the breakup between Dr. Manhattan and his original radiation poison girlfriend. He went into and I said to the people in the room, "Oh, I bet Snyder goes slow-mo and unnecessary close-up." I literally almost went to the ER. I was laughing so hard.
Well, let's be thankful it wasn't a close-up of his junk. The big blue penis that we saw throughout.
Snyder got what he wanted.
Well,
he's doing Fountainhead
soon. Hey, say what you want.
Well,
Snyder's actually a pretty good filmmaker. So.
Oh yeah.
The point is, we have to. The point is, the Marvel makers are trying to show us that there is a larger universe. It's not all, you know, saving the day with alien invasions and big giant superheroes. There are people out there who are looking out for the regular folk.
Oh,
And that's what I really like about the Netflix series that we're seeing, is that's what those characters are doing.
Well, and in that point, I kind of wish that they did Spider-Man as a Netflix series.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to see that, but he's got this. He's big cinema following, so.
Right? Fantastic Four's Netflix series would be awesome. Obviously, Moon Knight, Ghost Rider. We talked about that earlier.
But yeah, it's all about showing the larger universe. You have to show that there's more happening than the big story. You have to show the small stories too.
But in Avengers 4, it'd be nice to see Luke Cage and Daredevil and Jessica Jones and Iron Fist, kind of come out of the woodwork to help with the bigger threat.
That'll have about hour 10 of the movie, I think.
I hope so.
Andy, what were you saying?
Yeah, I really do hope that, if this Fox Marvel, merger or sale goes through, and they end up acquiring Fantastic Four, that they continue that kind of different windows on the Marvel universe, where we have the Iron Fist, the Luke Cage, the Jessica Jones honed in on Hell's Kitchen and Harlem, where if we're going to make a Fantastic Four series, put it out somewhere crazy. Put it in the negative zone. Put it take us beyond even interplanetary, and put us in something cosmically weird.
Yeah, very Kirby-ish.
Crank up that whole cosmic explorer vibe, and take a page from Lost in Space and make it something where we really get to see that familial dynamic as the four of them are out, thwarting Annihilus.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I'm totally on that.
Yeah. You guys think when you're doing world building in a superhero universe, maybe you need to think about tiers like that? Like you got to have your JLA and your Avengers tier, and then you got to have your, for lack of a better term, the Netflix Defenders or
absolutely,
and the Outsiders tier.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I believe that on both a setting level and a mechanical level. It's why I wrote my game in the first place.
Well, I mean, it's like you asked the question earlier, like why don't you just bring in Thor in to solve this problem? Well, because probably Thor's fucking busy.
Right.
Yeah, there's some stuff happening on Asteroid.
Thor's doing some fucking intergalactic shit right now.
Yeah, but if you really seriously wanted to break this down, you'd have to say, well, it would take Thor about the time of a pee break to wipe out most of Spider-Man's entire rogues gallery.
Well, that's true, but Thor's not always available. Thor's doing Thor shit.
Well, he could take a weekend and wipe out half the bad guys in the Marvel universe.
Come on, man. We've been reading the same comics for the last 75 years. We know Thor don't have a weekend. Thor don't have a weekend.
But you don't go there because you don't go there. It's the price of the admission. You accept that that there is a connectedness to this universe, but you don't press it too far or you shatter it.
Well,
I'm not trying to destroy the Marvel universe.
No, I understand where you're coming from.
Price of admission.
As a fan watching some of these movies, I'm like, you know what? Thor would have solved this shit in like 30 seconds. But I'm like, wait, maybe Thor's unavailable. Maybe these are the only guys we got left. So good luck, fuckers.
I want to say it was either
Hitchcock the downside to thinking that way though is after all you go, wow, I'm reading about the losers.
Hey guys, Aldo's been trying to get a word in.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Aldo.
Oh no, that's okay.
We're waxing intellectual here.
The stuff I was going to say is kind of past. I thought to the original question of like, do the Netflix series seem like they're part of the broader universe? And I don't think they have for me since the first. I mean, it did in the first season of Daredevil, right? Because Hell's Kitchen's reason for being is the Chitauri invasion. The way that it is the Chitauri invasion, and so that felt. That's all I need for me to get that sense of the connectedness of the universe. I don't really need these different tiers of characters to be participating in each other's storylines. For me, it would be enough if in Avengers 4 you get a reaction shot of Jessica Jones looking up at the sky as Thor zooms by, and that's enough for to signal. That's enough for the fan service for people to feel like, wow, it's all connected. I don't need to see Jessica doing whatever she's doing while the focus of this narrative is doing what they're doing, which is the Avengers. But I know that she lives in the same universe where these other things are happening. And I think in the first few seasons of, in the first season of Daredevil, at least, and I don't remember how much of those little flourishes they put in the later ones. I don't remember them. I think there may have been a passing mention of Thor in the first Jessica Jones season or something like that. Just some passing. That was, and then in, yeah, and then in the, in like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it was cool when they would do the crossover. So S.H.I.E.L.D. is coming down in the movies, and so it has ripples in the universe. But the whole thing of like, I need Thor to come. I would expect Thor to go and do this, or why doesn't Jessica Jones appear in that? I don't need that, but I do like it, and that's what I think was really cool about the 1960s stuff and 70s stuff, is that you would get that panel in the Captain America comic or in the Avengers comic where some character that really didn't have anything to do with the narrative looks up and sees Spider-Man or somebody.
Yeah, they threw those cameos in there,
and it ties it all together.
My hands down favorite, Daredevil section ever is, in the middle of that fight against Nuke, where the Avengers show up in Hell's Kitchen, and they're literally equated to gods.
Yeah, that the whole the internal dialogue that Daredevil has when he hears like the whir of Tony's. The power systems of Tony's armor, or
voice that can command a god and does. Captain America. And it's just brilliant writing on Miller's part.
Absolutely.
But it gives you that kind of window. And I'm with you, Aldo, in terms of I don't need Tony Stark to be in every movie. And as much as I like Spider-Man Homecoming, I can give or take him horning in on Parker's shtick, but those little bits here and there that tell you are in a linked universe, that I like.
Yeah.
But
what
I
do
tend to like my stuff compartmentalized. Like, I want my street level guys street level. I want my cosmic guys cosmic.
Yeah.
I want my big cosmic defenders, my big hero world-ending event, defenders to kind of be there. What I really like to see, though, is a Peter Parker cameo in a Daredevil Netflix series. And because that relationship between those two through the comics is very solid. Same with Spider-Man and Wolverine. But we'll see what we get with the the X-Men universe with the acquisition of 20th Century Fox. But you can easily throw in Spider-Man into a season of Daredevil. Even if it's just a quick cameo. Hey man, how you doing? Hey, I got this, man. You're good. And then he takes off, and it gives fan service and gets people interested in, but there's a very strong relationship in the comics between Daredevil and Spider-Man, and I would like to see that portrayed in the Netflix series.
Daredevil is chasing a guy, turns a corner and finds him all webbed up. Looks up and says,
"Simple as that.
Get out of my neighborhood."
Simple as that, and you see a shadow of Spider-Man swinging across. That would make me geek out like 8 years old. Like, oh my God, Spider-Man! But, hopefully they do that. It's easy to do with effects, and you don't need Tom Holland, even though Tom Holland would be down because he's probably the best Spider-Man, hands down, that I've seen on film.
Agreed.
Because he plays Peter and he plays Spider-Man perfectly. He's equally awkward as Peter Parker, and then he's equally as sarcastic and awesome as Spider-Man.
Yeah, if we're talking about what makes up a good superheroes universe, obviously interrelations are part of them. Although when you're writing the Superverse, it looks like I've been perusing your manuscript for a few days now. You got a couple of super teams that I see. There's the Freedom Ring, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're kind of your Avengers, right?
Yeah, they were a love letter to the Avengers. Yeah.
And then you've got Vanguard America, who is kind of the government-sponsored super team. Who would you say that they're parallel with?
They're not. I created Vanguard America simply because I needed the government foil for the heroes in the adventure. It made sense for them to be present in the narrative of the adventure, so I created them specifically for the adventure. And, this is one thing I was thinking about, because I remember when I interviewed last time, I was talking about how I was actually kind of taking a step away from creating a fully realized universe because of my own experience with those kinds of settings, which again I love, and I buy them all and I read them all and I love them all, but I have a hard time using them because all the niches are kind of like filled out, and so then I feel like my player characters have to operate within the bounds, or unless I change it a lot, within the bounds of stuff. So in some ways what I'm really creating is not a universe, but a series, an adventure series. And then there's a universe that is bubbling out of that adventure series, right? If that makes any sense. So yeah, it's not nearly as fully realized as something like, Freedom City or something like that. It's probably more akin to like the early iterations of the Champions universe, where it was just after a point of creating a bunch of characters and a bunch of enemies books and a bunch of sample heroes, they realized that in doing so, they had kind of created a broader universe starting to emerge from that. And that's the path that I've taken. Go from the more particular adventures and characters that people can use as tools in their own campaigns. And then there's kind of a suggestion of a universe beyond, because of that.
Well, I had Jeff D on several times to talk about, Villains and Vigilantes, which is now rebranded as the Mighty Protectors. And similar evolution there. They started off, it was an early superhero RPG way back in the olden days, and the setting kind of evolved from stuff showing up in your adventures.
Right.
Then after enough adventures, you were like, well, okay, I guess we got to, let's codify some of this, which, Nick, you're a comic book guy. Maybe that happens in your world too. You got stuff that makes sense for an issue, and then after a few issues, those elements show up. They kind of start to build out the world organically. Is that how it goes for you? Is it more of a, you fix sets up, set up the board first and the pieces move around?
You set up the board first. You have an idea of how you kind of want things to go, and then it's obviously based on fan reaction. And how they kind of saw things coming. You definitely want to keep them entertained. You definitely want to throw them something they've never seen before. So there's original idea that you kind of throw out in the forefront and you kind of set up and build upon. And then as it progresses, you kind of figure out like, okay, well, because you got to think about the timeline of how things get created. By the time I release an issue, we're 4 months in. So we're talking about a 4-month-old idea, and within that 4 months, people have come up with their ideas of how we can change things and how we can make things more dynamic or more entertaining. So as we progress, obviously that stuff might change. World building is a pain in the ass. I'm just going to tell you right now. Anybody that has ever thought about being a comic creator is like, oh, that's cool. I'll just throw stuff down from my imagination. Yeah, well. Newsflash, fucker, it's a lot more than that.
Pimping ain't easy, brother.
No, pimping ain't easy. And it ain't free neither. So when you start getting to certain aspects and you're guiding a storyline into a certain focal point, and you start realizing that, okay, well, maybe this focal point's no longer making sense when we originally created it. So we got to make alterations and then still try and keep it true to the original premise, which is anytime I create a story, I have the beginning game and I have the end game, and then I fill in the blanks.
This makes me wonder if maybe world building, and I got a bunch of RPG designers here, so feel free to tell me to shut up, guys. But I wonder if setting design is easier for gamers because, in a way, you're just giving, an RPG universe is a toolbox. You're giving it to a GM, and you can use or not use whatever you want to tell your story. You can take this hammer and bash it around until it looks like what you want it to look at, like whatever tool you need for your story.
Well, from my perspective, I remember back when I was active on the Green Ronin boards, I remember there was this fellow who had taken one of my adventures, Time of Vengeance, and had moved it to having it happen during World War II. He moved it back 50, 60 years. And I went from there to a thread where somebody had taken the adventure and moved it to Israel, which made, all the New Testament, all the Old Testament Wrath of the Pharaoh stuff very immediately resonant. And I remember thinking about that time that in a way the gaming industry kind of was a preview for what you see happening in the music business these days. We're just providing the beats. You have to go into it knowing that everybody out there is going to take that and put their own rhymes on top of it. Right. So yeah, and honestly, I write with a modularity in mind. Like when we did Emerald City. I gave it like a very, 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 very short World War II backstory, so that if you wanted to have like some legacy heroes to refer back to, you had them. But you could wipe them completely out of that universe, and everything else in that book still works.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that modularity is something that I actually kind of reverse engineered back into the Superverse, because originally I designed the Freedom Ring as a fully realized superhero team. And then again, I started to have misgivings about that. So what I did is that I still present what they would be like if they ever became a superhero team, but the adventures take place before their formation, and the adventures take place so the player character team walks through a series of events where the not yet put together members of the Freedom Ring are sort of going through their own stories, and the player character stories have opportunities to interact with these other stories that are kind of evolving. And that means that the player characters have this opportunity to maybe prevent the Freedom Ring from ever being created, maybe become members of the Freedom Ring, maybe become rivals with or opponents of the Freedom Ring because of the Freedom Ring member motivations and actions, depending on the politics of the individual players involved. So I had something that was fully formed, and I purposefully made it more modular and set up the pieces so the players could interact with those individual grains. And the same with the Iron Gauntlet. The Iron Gauntlet was originally imagined as like the Legion of Doom to the Freedom Ring, but same thing. The adventures walk you through the path, the story of how those characters come together eventually, so that you might get rid of members of the Iron Gauntlet before they actually fully realize, and the motivations of that villain team will probably refocus and be directed at the player characters more so than at what were originally viewed as their rivals, which was the Freedom Ring, right? So I wanted them to be able to live through those stories and change them.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, as a comic creator and as someone who plays RPGs, especially superhero-based ones, I've used a lot of the little campaigns that we've done as basis for stories that I've told. Just kind of use it as a free-flow jam session of creative ideas, and some of these things just kind of become brilliant as far as like character development and story escalation and things like that. And you're like, oh man, that'd make an awesome comic book, and then it's you and four other dudes going, yeah, dude, you should write that. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm glad I took good notes, of everything that was going on.
That's cool.
This is kind of a weird analogy, but I find that the best source books, the best games out there, the most useful things that I find almost follow the Chipotle model. You come along and you as an author, you as a game designer, you as a setting, a world builder, you have a whole line of different elements. And when that GM comes to your table, so to speak, they might take a little bit of black beans, and they might take a little bit of rice, and they might take a whole heap of steak, and the next guy might take something.
They might have steak and chicken. They might get crazy on you.
Exactly. But the source books, the rule books, the adventures that provide those granular elements, that provide more different ingredients, not necessarily telling you how to put together, I find are almost the most useful for me.
Yeah,
because I can
the
take
serving
that,
line approach.
Exactly. I can make up a plot on the fly. Plot's easy. It's the discrete elements in that plot that make up the world and make it
Execution
interesting.
and prose, yeah.
So maybe a weird analogy, but it's just kind of how.
No, but it totally fits.
Totally fits. Yeah.
It totally fits. It's like, okay, you have the serving line, and it has so much stuff on here.
Yeah.
And then it's up to the individual to build the world.
And then your first chapter,
or the burrito, or whatever.
Here's a couple cards. Here's a couple ways that you can put this together that we know will taste good. Ignore us if you don't think that tastes good.
Right.
Make your own. Here's all the ingredients.
Actually, I probably think that is the best analogy for any type of world building right now.
I'll take it.
I kind of want to publish it.
I have to agree with Andy here. That's probably the best take on And you can take that towards RPG gaming. You can take it towards independent comics. Is that we provide a serving line, and the great thing about indie comics, and this kind of takes it back to my world, is that we're constantly in contact with our fan base. We're always drawing ideas from them, like, hey, man, how about this? How about that? You know, hey, what's going to happen here? And we're like, okay, well, these are sometimes it kind of comes across as something that we never thought about. And we're like, okay, we should probably give some attention to that. And hopefully we do the fan service because we're small and we're independent and we want to keep them around because we like having a fan base. And, you know, we try to build that perfect burrito or that perfect taco for them. Sometimes you miss the mark, but I'd say 9% of the time you've delivered something that everybody can kind of dig in on. You know, and I'm sure that's the same with the RPG game.
I've been writing tabletop RPGs for 21 years, and I live for that one time every year at Gen Con. Somebody walks up to me and goes, "Pardon me, aren't you John Lighthouser?"
Oh, nobody knows my goddamn name. Even though I have a big banner that says Nick Garber, comic book artist, they're like, hey, are you part of Apogee? And I'm like, yeah. And here's my name. They're like, I don't care what your name is. Here's what I want to know. I'm like,
one of the first things I do when I sit down at a con game, you know, I have everyone, we go around the table. What's your name? Where are you from? You know, what's your favorite flavor of Jell-O? When it finally gets around to me, it's, my name's Andy. This is all my fault.
Hey, sorry, I had to put myself on mute there first. Oh, can you guys hear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, what's getting mowed over there?
They tore down my deck, and they're continuing to tear it. That's construction. Let's just say it's construction. So.
Oh, I'm relieved. I was worried you were having some manscaping done while we were talking.
I was kind of hoping it was manscaping. Am I the only one? I kind of wanted to see a nice, either a lightning bolt or a heart shape.
It's the fainting goat logo. That's what he's.
Oh God! Okay,
Okay,
you had me at fainting.
I got nothing. How loud is that? Can you guys hear me, or is it horribly
It's
annoying?
very subtle.
We
Well,
hear you. We hear you just fine. It's just in the background.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's like my dog's barking. I mean, you guys have been dealing with that shit for months.
I actually never hear your dog bark.
Well, then I'm doing something right as an owner.
Yeah. Well, hey, I gotta wrap it up and go pick up the kid from daycare.
We didn't even talk
let's-
Steve Ditko. What the hell?
We didn't talk Steve Ditko. I'm sorry.
We're gonna have to do another show next week.
We can do a show next week. Talk about Ditko. I apologize. I just you know, if I don't get there by 6, I put him out on the curb, and you know, there's a lot of coyotes in the area. So
Do they at least pin a $20 bill on his collar to say thanks for coming out? Good luck.
all right. Aldo,
Yes.
you're on Kickstarter right now. Folks
Yes.
should go to Kickstarter, check out the Superverse, and you've got 3 weeks left or 2 weeks left.
19 days.
19 days. All right. So check it out. Spread the word on social media. Try to raise awareness. Wave the flag. It's a great setting. I've been reading it for a few weeks now. Let's spread the word. Andy, thank you for coming out. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Great to be back, brother.
Do you want to come back for Steve Ditko next week?
Let me check the schedule first, but yeah, I mean, my man, the question.
Oh, dude. Okay, Andy, I'm adding you on Facebook, Andy. This is happening. You and me are gonna be friends. You don't have a choice in the matter. We're gonna be friends.
Jacob, you're on mute, buddy.
I was just saying, I love the question.
You want to be here for Steve Ditko podcast?
We can talk inspiration of Rorschach.
The only thing I really know of, for Steve is Spider-Man. I don't think I've read any other Ditko titles.
Okay.
Hawk and
Dr. Green
Dove,
stuff?
Blue Beetle.
I'm pretty much a Marvel guy. I didn't read much of DC.
Okay, I don't know if we're friends on social media. Add me and we'll talk. I'll get you caught up.
Okay.
All right, cool. Chris, thanks for coming out.
You're very welcome, sir. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Jacob, always a pleasure to have you here as well.
It's always a delight.
Nick, thanks for coming out.
Always a pleasure, man. Have me on anytime.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning into the Banff Podcast, and we will catch you next time.